I will not put American boots on the ground.
We all agree there will be no American boots on the ground.
The United States is not going to deploy ground troops.
Instead of sending large ground forces overseas, we're partnering with nations from South Asia to North Africa to deny safe haven to terrorists who threaten America.
The president has also made clear that American military action would not include combat boots on the ground.
The notion that the United States should be putting boots on the ground, I think, would be a profound mistake.
No boots on the ground, but definitely a lot of military advisors. That's a good place to start our roundtable. Joining us right now is Raul, political and economic analyst and CEO of Gladius Consulting, and Ari Rabin-Havt, host of The Agenda and former advisor to Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid. Good to have both of you with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so guys, we're talking about President Obama ordering the deployment of close to 500 more U.S. troops to Iraq. Officially, military advisors establish a new training base in the Anbar province. Ari, is this a reaction or maybe an overcorrection based on what he said in Europe, or a reaction to the reality of the situation on the ground?
I don't know what it is, but look, as a progressive, I've been saying for a long time, this new buildup concerns me. The fact that we go from 35 now up to 3,500 troops back in Iraq, whether they're ground troops or advisors or whatever you want to call it, that quickly can slowly bleed up to 35,000, and we're back in a war that the American people wanted ended years ago.
Raul, do you think we're headed back into a war?
No, I don't. And unfortunately, I think, you're facing a situation right now where the president has basically said one thing, that his aim was basically to degrade and destroy ISIS. And yet his strategy for winning that war or winning that battle against ISIS is completely ineffective. It is totally dependent on the Iraqi government fighting ISIS. That's obviously proven to be incredibly ineffective. And then we have this sort of incremental approach to the war in which we are continuing to send, additional troops in the hopes that somehow we're going to motivate the Iraqi government to stand up and fight. And it's not proving successful.
A few moments ago, we played a soundbite from General Ray Odierno, who was on CBS this morning, talking about the need for these Arab nations to step up. We do hear about Saudi Arabia getting involved in Yemen. We know about the rivalry between Saudi Arabia and Iran here. But do you think there's any room for a broader coalition, Raul? When you look at these Arab nations, are they going to ever step up?
Look, I think it'd be very, very problematic. This coalition is basically hanging on by a thread. I think the elephant in the room here, quite frankly, that few people are talking about, is the fact that Iraq is very quickly becoming a client state of Iran. You have General Qasem Soleimani, who heads the Iraqi Quds force, basically leading the Shiite militias, which are the ones that are basically battling ISIS. The Pentagon has basically come out and said that there really are no Sunni fighters involved in this fight against ISIS. Anbar province is a Sunni province. That is where ISIS is concentrated right now. And those tribespeople are simply not picking up arms and going to fight against ISIS, because they are obviously completely at odds with, the Shiite masters in Baghdad, and obviously, the Shiite Quds forces and militias coming in to supposedly fight ISIS. I mean, I think if you're an elder tribesman in Anbar province and you have to pick between ISIS and the Shiites, you're in a really difficult dilemma right now.
All right, there's a lot of concern that even if you did get the support of some of the Sunni tribes, as soon as the U.S. troops leave, that it would just fall right back into the hands of ISIS. Do you agree with that assessment?
Well, if not ISIS, look, I think the Sunni-Shia rivalry in this region has gone on for centuries. The idea that we are going to solve it is ridiculous. Look, we have a real issue, which is the problem is, and Raul is absolutely right, the forces that are most fighting ISIS right now are Hezbollah, the Peshmerga, and Iran. And Hezbollah is a client of Iran, so take that for what it is. And we're going to sit down in the middle of this and think we can solve a Sunni-Shia struggle that has gone on for centuries. I think that's hubris that is even too much for us.
So what do you do there, though? Do you just ignore the situation and abandon the region?
I mean, to be honest, if I knew what to do about solving the Sunni-Shia fights that have gone on for hundreds of years, I would be smarter than I am now and a lot richer too. I mean, look, I don't think anybody knows what to do. And if the answer is 100,000 American troops have to occupy Iraq for the next 100 years, I don't think that's an appropriate answer that the American people are willing to politically go about doing.
I don't know. When you look at Reid Odierno's comments, it's a big question mark for me why we don't hear a different case being made. There is, of course, the 100,000 troop option. There's what we're doing now, which is a piecemeal approach, but we don't hear anything in between. That's a conversation that I think we need to have. Guys, we're going to ask you to stick around. We got more to come here. We want to talk about Marco Rubio's week that could have started out bad, but maybe wound up working out pretty well for him.
Yeah, I
Even
think
Jon
so.
Stewart from The Daily Show coming to his defense. We'll talk about that and more coming up right after this.
Rubio's past mixing of personal and political money.
He's stealing money for his personal use from the GOP.
The New York Times reported Tuesday that the Florida Republican had spent $80,000 for a luxury speedboat.
It's a great boat.
Now that I've seen the boat, I've changed my mind.
The bottom line,
That's not accurate. I'm not poor, but I'm not rich either.
Marco Rubio, turns out, unlike a lot of folks in Washington, more like the rest of us in the real world. A compilation of responses there to that New York Times hit piece on Senator Marco Rubio's luxury spending. He seems to be shaking it off okay.
I love that you just put like a Taylor Swift little thing on there. That was great. Back with us is Ari Rabin-Havt. I know that's what you were doing in Raul Moss. Thanks so much.
I like T Swift, I'm not going to lie.
I know you do. Your daughter
No shame in
loves
that.
her too as well. So what this New York Times piece painted Senator Marco Rubio as an unwise spender, saying as he rose in politics, he sometimes intermingled personal and political money. So Ari, do you think that either one of these pieces, because they actually did two pieces, do you think either one of them really hurt him, or do you think they helped him?
I think this is one of those cases where the New York Times had one real story that actually does matter, which is intermingling personal and political money is actually problematic. And then a second story, which I actually think made him look good, which basically the second story was he had $200,000 he had $800,000 in debt, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, including student loans and a mortgage, which I think is something most Americans can relate to. Got an $800,000 windfall from writing a book, and went out and bought an $80,000 speedboat. And when I saw that, I said, hell, if I got an $800,000 windfall from something, I might go spend $80,000 on something frivolous. Like, that seems like something the average person would do. Frankly, that seems like a responsible ratio, and the boat looked fun. But I think
and it's a boat. It's not a luxury yacht.
Yeah, it's stupid wording. It was a boat, and look, boats are expensive. There are pits in the ocean you throw money into, right?
Right.
But you know, you live in Florida. People have boats, and if he got $800,000, he spent $80,000 on a boat. I don't care. I do think the idea of intermixing personal and political spending, which was a second piece of those stories, actually does matter and speaks to something important. In that case, because you're taking donor money and using it for personal use.
But if there was any question, Ari, about how this could have impacted Marco Rubio, all you had to do was tune into The Daily Show last night with Jon Stewart, who actually defended Marco Rubio. Let's take a listen.
But the New York Times is just getting warmed up. This morning, the Times drawing a front page story. Front page. It's going to blow the chinos right off of the Rubio campaign.
The New York Times this week detailed Rubio's debt and mortgages, including his purchase of 3 homes, putting no money down on 2 of them. After a publisher paid Rubio $800,000 to write a book in 2012, the senator paid off $100,000 in law school loans.
You bastard. Paying off law school loans? How dare you? At long last, Senator, have you no sense of insolvency?
Well, I think, Raul, this tells us less about Marco Rubio and more about how, I guess, low the New York Times...
I think this is more damaging to the New York Times than it was to Rubio.
Exactly. Raul, what do you say?
Raul, what do you think?
I think I think if the New York Times had the opportunity to do this over again, they would absolutely rethink their strategy. And by the way, while we're on the subject of sort of mixing, contributions to a political campaign with personal monies, look at what's happening over in the Clinton Foundation. I mean, you talk about, absolutely mixing one thing with the other. You've got a presidential candidate who's basically the Secretary of the State, whose husband is running a major foundation and receiving monies that are, in fact, or seemingly influencing policy. I mean, it pales in comparison.
All right, Raul, let's let Ari weigh in here. I know he wants to get a response in here.
I mean, look, I think there are things that you have to ask yourself about certain donors to the Clinton Foundation, but even Peter Schweitzer, who wrote that book, isn't saying there's any evidence of an intermingling of the two. That accusation is actually not made with the Clinton camp there. There are other accusations that one can make, but intermingling and the idea that, look, that foundation has done a ton of good work around the world. You go to Africa, you see how many people are getting antiretroviral drugs because of the work of the Clinton Foundation. You go through it. Now, there are other problems, but intermingling of funds was not one of them.
Well, I think Raul does have a fair point here. There is, it does seem to be a double standard based on the Clintons and Rubio, and it's hard to talk about Marco Rubio in this situation without talking about Hillary Clinton. A lot of folks on Twitter.
You're basically going after a guy who is, by all accounts, and people who know him, and actually I've been in Marco Rubio's house. Believe me, this guy leads a very middle-class lifestyle. I mean, this is not somebody who's living high off the hog. He has made some mistakes in the past. He's acknowledged them.
All right.
But this is not a guy who, by any stretch of the imagination, is out there stuffing his pockets or even trying to do so.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Guys, we're out of
Raul
time.
Moss, Ari Rabin-Havt, thank you both for joining us here on Newsmax Now. Always good to have you.
Thank you.
Well, he's not stuffing his pockets, but he is using these two articles to raise a little money, as well he should.
Yeah, that was a smart move on his part. Still more to come. You're watching Newsmax Now.